Gift the remarkable with Marc Jacobs fragrances this holiday season. From the iconic Daisy and Perfect to the all-new Daisy Wild, Marc Jacobs perfume gift sets include everything she needs to feel special. From her favorite fragrance, plus the matching travel spray, holiday gifts don't get much more perfect than this. So if you're looking for a gift inspiration these holidays, gift the remarkable with Marc Jacobs.
The new Apple Watch Series 10 is here. It has the biggest display ever. It's also the thinnest Apple Watch ever, making it even more comfortable on your wrist. And it's the fastest charging Apple Watch, getting you 8 hours of charge in just 15 minutes. Introducing the all-new Apple Watch Series 10, now available for the first time in glossy jet black aluminum. Compared to previous generation, iPhone XS or later required. Charge time and actual results will vary.
Money decisions don't have to be either or. With Bank of America, they can be yes and. Like yes to sunny vacations and rainy day funds. Can our digital tools and guidance help you create the future you want? Yes. And help you keep enjoying today too. Do more with a bank that asks, what would you like the power to do? Explore our tips and more at bankofamerica.com/yes and.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
Hey there, Duke fans, and welcome to episode number 659 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We are coming to you on Sunday, November 3rd, 2024. It's very late in the evening, but Jason and I are here because in 24 hours from now, we will have had our first basketball game of the year, our first Duke men's basketball game and Duke women. Duke women open up tomorrow at 11 a.m., Duke men at 7 p.m. We're going to talk about basketball, we'll talk about football, and stay tuned. We do have a nice little giveaway that Jason and I are having. But before we do all that, I'm Donald Wine. I'm your host for this episode. I have Jason Evans with me. Jason, how was your weekend?
It's been really good. Actually, I did a really interesting, fun thing tonight. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the man who for 40 plus years led, this country's fight against various diseases, communicable and infectious diseases, was a guest speaker at the Jewish Community Center here in Atlanta. He's promoting a new book he has. They had like 400 or 500 people show up for this event. It was sold out. I was in the second row. I had great seats because my mother was the one moderating. She was the one doing the conversation with him up on stage with Anthony Fauci, asking him questions. He was fascinating. It was an amazing, amazing conversation. I learned so much about the history of fighting disease in America. And look, I know this may sound political, but I think the man's a national hero, a global hero. And it was really cool to get to be that close to him and listen to what he had to say about the world today.
I think that's really cool. I wish I would have been able to witness that. I will say that my before 2020, obviously, my knowledge of, communicable and infectious diseases started with wash your hands. If you wash your hands, 99% of this stuff won't have to be dealt with. But of course, he was very instrumental and very important to get us out of the COVID pandemic and get us to this post-COVID world that we're now in. Okay, now let's start with basketball. Again, I mentioned that Duke men host Maine tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time at Cameron Indoor Stadium. And we're going to preview the Maine Black Bears. But before we do that, Jason, we have a giveaway. And we want to tell people about this giveaway and what they could possibly win and how they can win it. So, Jason, first off, let's talk about the actual item that we're giving away. And it is a home field Duke Blue Devils classic campus pullover. It's one of the new pullovers that they came out. It is very, very cool. Jason and I both have one, and I will
It's
tell you,
gorgeous.
it's gorgeous. It has pockets. It has the script Duke that you remember from like the early 2000s that were on the helmets. So it brings me back to when I was in school because that was the football helmet when I was in school. But it's really, really cool. Very nice Duke blue. Has a little bit of a sheen on it too, so people will see you sparkle from very far away. It will not affect the sight line of any basketball player if you are wearing it in Cameron. But I also don't think you should wear it in Cameron. Wear into Cameron, but not while you're in Cameron because Cameron's still kind of hot despite the AC. It's
Yeah.
still a warm building, but you will look cool when you wear this thing. So, Jason, I think first of all, what should people do to win this award or win this pullover? Because I think
Yeah.
it has to be something really, really cool. We have to get everybody involved.
Exactly. So Home Field sent us an extra one of these. They sent it to me, and I'm going to send it out to one of you. And it's a size large, by the way. So if you're a bigger guy like me, maybe give it to
And
a
me,
child or
yeah,
something.
we about
Yeah, right.
Jason and I got the same size.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. It's a large. That's the reality of the situation. But here's what we're going to do for the main game. Send in your headlines. Send in your observations. We want the best, the brightest, the funniest. You give us a good headline. Donald and I are going to read all of them. By the way, we're gonna delay our recap of the game. We're going to do it like midday, lunchtime or so on Tuesday, so that we give plenty of time for people to think and come up with a good headline from this game. The best headline we get, judged by me and Donald, will get the home field pullover. And it is a nice, nice Duke item.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way to start the basketball calendar with a nice little giveaway that, again, courtesy of our friends at Home Field. If you don't win the pullover, you obviously can get one yourself. You can use our code DBR Podcast, which will save you 15% off of anything on Home Field site, not just the pullover. But I do say the pullover is worth an addition to your wardrobe. Now, Jason, again, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. That is where you can send your headlines after the game. Again, around lunchtime on the East Coast on Tuesday is when Jason and I are going to record. So get it in by then. Think about it, but don't delay because you don't want to. The last thing you want is for your really, really cool headline to come in after we've recorded. So get it in that way we can have it under consideration, and we will announce the winner on the show after with the recap on Tuesday. So with that, Jason, let's get into the preview of the Maine Black Bears. They're 15-17 last year, 7-9 in the America East Conference. They were tied for fourth in that conference. On the road, they were 5-13 last year, but of course that they have a loaded non-conference schedule with a lot of teams that basically kind of paid to have them come over and give them a little workout. They averaged 67.6 points per game, 32.3 in the paint, and one thing that they did was average almost 14 points off of turnovers. But Jason, the big news from Maine this past week is that there's a little link between Maine and Duke. And we're not talking about the state. Obviously, Cooper Flagg is from Maine, but his twin brother Ace is now going to be going to Maine. He committed to the Maine Black Bears. I think it was early last week, but it did not reclassify like Cooper, so we will not see him on the basketball court tomorrow night. But Jason, I start with you to say, who will we see on the basketball court tomorrow night for Maine? And I know it's going to be like a lot of these teams we'll see early in the year, a very experienced squad with a lot of seniors and a lot of grad students.
Okay, I'm going to ask a favor. Before I get to who we will see, the players for Maine, I just want to make a couple general notes about this team that we're playing. You
Sure.
mentioned the fact that Ace Flagg has committed to Maine. I have heard anecdotally that a lot of Cooper Flagg's family and friends, a lot of people from the state of Maine who are basketball fans, consider this game to be one of the biggest basketball events in Maine history. Maine is just not
Sounds
a state
right.
that has a lot of.
Duncan Robinson did not play Duke, so
No, right.
Until he shows up, I guess he did it. He would come with the heat. That would probably be a little bit bigger than this game, but
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. So yes, this
Right,
is a
so-
pretty big deal.
This is a big deal for the state of Maine, both for their team to be playing Duke and obviously for Cooper Flagg to be making his debut on national television at the college level against his home state team. So I bet, Donald, I will not be at all surprised if you see a lot of Maine Black Bear fans in Cameron for this game, including Cooper Flagg's family. I don't know that for certain, but that's what I've heard anecdotally, that probably his family, a lot of friends, a lot of Maine basketball people are going to be coming down for this game to watch Maine play the Duke Blue Devils. We should note this about Maine. They're number 257 in KenPom. They're number 223 in Torvik. You mentioned fourth in the America East last year. They're projected to finish fourth in the America East again this year. This is not a team that is traditionally a basketball power. You said they won 15 games a year ago. That was their most wins since 2011. 15 games, most wins since 2011. That said, Maine brings back 4 of their top 5 scorers from last year. They have a roster full of experienced players. They lost their best player from last year, like their number 1 guy. But other than that, they bring back a lot of good players, and I'm going to get into them now. The best of them is probably a guy named Kellen Tynes. He's a 5th-year senior. He's in his 3rd year at Maine. This is not a guy who's transferred around a lot. This is a guy who's stayed put and gotten better every year. He is the 2-time, you ready for this? The 2-time America East Defensive Player of the Year. Kellen Tynes is a damn good defender. Last year he was last year and the year before. Past 2 years he was 3rd team all conference. He has led the conference in steals each of the past 2 seasons, including 1 year, 22-23. He had 3.3 steals per game. That's a big old
lot.
That is a lot of steals.
He probably. I'm not saying that he's a bad passer because he does get assists, but 3.3 steals per game. He probably had more steals and assists than most games.
Yeah, I think he might have. Yeah, it was certainly close. In any event, Kellen Tynes will be a very interesting defensive matchup for Tyrese Proctor. It's possible. It's possible, I guess, maybe that they put him on Con Knipple if they think that Con is the biggest threat. He is a really, really solid defender. In the backcourt next to him is a guy named Jaden Clayton, who is also in his 3rd year at Maine. He's a junior. But Tynes and Clayton have been the starting backcourt for 3 years in a row. These guys know each other really, really well. They've played every game together, started every game together for the past 2 years. And they're a really good defensive combo. Now, here's the problem with Kellen Tynes and Jaden Clayton. They're bad shooters.
I was going to say, none of this team can shoot. This team was one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the country last year. Now, having said that, we just jinxed it. Now they're going to go like 8 for 10. But I'm just saying, right. Entering the game, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a team that is expected to shoot well because last year and the year before that, they just didn't.
Yeah. Clayton and Tynes both hit less than 30% from 3 a year ago. The guy on the team who's a decent 3-point shooter is AJ Lopez. He is a senior. You're going to hear this over and over again. Senior, junior, graduate, all that kind of stuff. AJ Lopez has been at Maine for a while. He's the only decent 3-point shooter on the roster. And by decent, I mean he hit about just a little less than 35%. And he didn't even shoot all that many threes. In fact, you said it. Maine was one of the bottom 30 teams in the country in terms of the number of points they scored from 3-point range. It's just they're not a good team from the outside. But it's worth noting, at least a year ago, they were really good at defending the 3-point line. Like literally one of like the 30 best teams in the country at defending the 3-point line. And look, we know Duke's reputation this year is that it's, you've surrounded Cooper Flagg and Man Kamen Malawach with tons of great shooters. It'll be an interesting test right out of the gate for Duke to be playing a team that is absolutely elite at preventing teams from getting good looks from the perimeter. There's one other guy I want to mention. I mean, I could go through a lot more, but there's one who I think is really significant. Every time Duke plays an opposing team, I think you need to look at who do they have with size, because Duke's size is freaking overwhelming. And the guy who's going to be manning the middle for Maine, it looks like, is a transfer, a guy named Ridvan Tutic. He's from Serbia. He's 6'10", 240 plus pounds. Hoss. This is a big, big fella down there in the middle. 2 years ago, he played at New Hampshire. And last year, he transferred to Maine, but he tore his ACL in the preseason, so he missed the entire season. He is a good rebounder. He takes up a lot of space in the lane, 240 pounds. Of course he does. Maine will need him because they were a terrible, terrible offensive rebounding team a year ago. Fairly good on the defensive glass, but not a good team on the offensive glass. And in fact, I think that what Maine does is they try to some extent to, I want to call it the pack line. It's not quite like Virginia plays defense, but they're playing a defense that's not letting you get into the middle. They want you to shoot contested threes. I mean, like, who doesn't? But apparently Maine is really good at doing that. And they're not going to be a team that tries to get out on the break. They're not going to be a team. They're going to send all 5 guys to the defensive boards. They want to get every defensive rebound. They don't care that much about getting offensive rebounds. And they're going to play slow. This is my last thing about them, Donald. They were 300th in tempo a year ago. Folks may recall, if you listen to our recap of the Arizona State game, I noted one of the most significant things I thought from that game was that Duke and Arizona State played 73 possessions each, which is a big, big number. 73 possessions is fast basketball. A year ago, Donald, Maine played 65 and a half possessions per game. 8 less. And 8 is a ton. 8 is a lot. 8 less than Duke played against Arizona State. I really think that Maine's goal in this game is to slow it down. Maine wants to keep Duke. Maine would love to keep Duke in the 60s, I think. I'm not sure that'll be a real chore, but I guarantee you that is their plan is to slow this game down, to not let Duke speed it up. Ken Pomeroy projects that Duke wins this game 82-56. He says a 26-point Duke victory. I don't know. 80 may be tough if Maine is willing to hold on to the ball the entire shot clock and not let Duke run at all.
And this is going to be a good test for our defense, right? Like a good defense is terrific in a half-court offensive set, especially when a team is running slow. But there's also times where guys like to go for it, right? They like to speed up the tempo by trying to go for glory and go for, run in the passing lane and try and intercept the ball and go the other way and try and basically, speed up the tempo of the game by getting the ball quicker. That is where you get out of position. That is where guys can get open threes and open shots and be able to knock them down. I'm interested to see if that is Duke's approach to this game, if the game gets too slow for them, right? Like when you say the difference of 8 possessions, difference of 8 possessions could be 24 points if you hit a 3 in all those possessions, right? So 24 points is a lot of points. It also means that every 30 seconds, this team is just dragging, putting you down and making it where you feel like you have to gamble to go fast. And I think that's the big test here is one, of course, we're going to talk about rotations and how that starts. I think we have our starting 5, but I think our rotations are going to be interesting when there is a real game and we're not necessarily blowing a team out with 100 points. If we score 81 points, I think that's great. And I think we should aim for 80 to 90 to 100 points every single game, except for the, I guess, 2 or 3 that I picked over 100 in the stats game. But having said that, I think the question for me is going to be what happens when a team comes in and tries to dictate the tempo? How does Duke turn that around? Do they use that to their advantage, or do they try to force the issue and bring the game back to where they want to play? It's something that good teams are going to do. It's something that teams like Maine are going to do. So it's a great test in that regard.
Yeah, I don't know that there's all that much to say about Maine other than, the things that we've brought up here. I think what I want to see from Duke is maturity. We are a young team, and I think Maine is not up to the task, I don't think, of playing with Duke in a fast-paced game. So they're going to try and use their maturity and their senior leadership to play this at their pace. And I want to see Duke, especially the young guys, figure out a way to impose their will on the game instead of letting the 22, 23-year-olds of Maine have a little more control than they should. I don't know that this is a game that even under the best circumstances, Maine really can win. But if Maine makes it really close, that would be frustrating for me because that would mean probably that Duke got out of their game plan and wasn't executing properly. So I'm hoping that we see Duke impose their will on Maine rather than the other way around.
Yeah, and the final thing for me, you mentioned some of the maturity. I think that ties into the roles and responsibilities of everybody on this team, right? Now that we are playing real games, what are the roles that every player has, and do they execute that role? Whether it's to come off the bench and be a microwave, whether it's to start and give you 30 minutes of defense, whether it's to shoot the three, whether it's to play excellent, get excellent rebounding, whether in the case of man it's to, block and jam everything within sight. For Cooper Flag, is it to be the generational talent that we have said that he is? Whatever that role is, this is the first day that it counts for them to understand their role and execute, and for them to be able to say, yes, I look back and I see a 1-0 in this on this record sheet because I did my job. And I think that's where us getting older, us getting tougher, us getting more physical in the offseason, that is where this is going to pay off. This is the test, because now the seniors, now the graduate students and the transfers, all of them are responsible for that part. It's not the freshmen, even though the freshmen may show maturity, even though we might start three of them tomorrow. It's those leaders that need to start leading. We haven't heard who the captains are yet, at least officially. But I think that is where the captains need to step in, whoever they are, and go, guys, it's time to go. This is our job. This is our task. This is what we need to do. Everybody be
Yep.
accountable. Let's go out and get it. And again, that mentality that, John said he talked to Shane about, of let's make this where in the under 12 TV timeout, the main fans are just glad they're there because they're witnessing an execution via the Duke Blue Devils offense. So
I
hopefully
love it.
that happens, and hopefully we're blowing the doors off of them so that everybody can get those reps. But again, this is a leadership game. It's the first game of the year. Everyone's super excited. It's on the leaders to show up and let these guys know this is our task. Let's go out and do everything we need to do. Now, Jason, let's switch from this year's team very quickly to next year's team, because as we expected over the weekend, we did get a commit from Shelton Henderson. He committed to the Duke Blue Devils. He is the number 30 recruit in the ESPN 100, number 15 in 247. He's a 6'6", 220-pound small forward from the Houston area, Bel Air, Texas. So, Jason, very quickly, I know we talked a little bit about his game, but what does it mean now
Yeah.
that he's officially a Blue Devil?
Yeah, you mentioned he's 6'6". He's got a 6'10" or 6'11" wingspan. I think that's one of the reasons he's ranked in the top 20.
Yeah, that helps.
Uh, yeah, I spoke a lot about his game on the last episode. I want to mention a couple things about him. First of all, he's a guy who is known for getting better and for working super hard on his game and constantly improving. A year ago at this time, this is a kid who was ranked outside the top 100. And over the winter, he started rising. He made like the top 50 or so by the start of this summer. By the end of the summer, he's in the teens. And he's a guy who keeps on getting better. And a player like that, you love to get a player like that. It means they are a hard worker. It means they are maturing. It means they are coachable. All the things that you want to hear about a kid at this age, that's what this kid brings to the table. I want to mention that his AAU coach, and I can't stress enough that this may have impacted his recruitment. His AAU coach is John Lucas III, Jay Lucas's brother.
Yep.
And so Duke had a little in with this kid. John Lucas, by the way, was John Lucas III, I should say, very good basketball player. Is now a AAU coach and a very, very successful one. And I don't know that he told Shelton Henderson where to go to school or anything like that, but I'm sure he said, "My brother, they got a good thing going down there at Duke." And I'm sure also that Jay heard everything you could hear about Shelton Henderson from his brother. I mean, the fact that Duke wanted this kid so badly, the fact that they went after him so hard, they had every piece of information you could want about Shelton Henderson from John Lucas III. And it's worth noting that when Shelton Henderson made his announcement, he specifically, mentioned mom, dad, several of the people around him. Oh, he shouted out Coach Lucas. He talked extensively about the difference that John Lucas III has made on his life. And I'm sure that Jay Lucas is super excited to coach this guy starting next year. Last thing I wanted to mention is that I've seen some interesting comparisons for this guy. I sort of mentioned Stephon Castle on the last show.
Hmm.
Um, I stick by that to some extent. I think maybe not quite as good a handle as Stephon Castle has, but people, just because he's now coming to Duke, everyone's throwing out Justice Winslow, Chris Carrawell, Wendell Moore, that kind of guy, kind of physical wing that does all the dirty work. Frankly, maybe isn't the greatest shooter and scorer. I think that's very much what Shelton Henderson's going to be for this Duke team. And it's worth noting that he and Nick Kamenia played together last year on Team USA. They know each other. They know their games. They know how their games mesh together. And I'm just super excited to have this guy on board and a part of the Duke family. Um, Welcome to the Brotherhood, Shelton. We are thrilled to have you, and you're going to be an impactful player, no question about it.
So first off, I will say in the case of Shelton Henderson, I mentioned he comes from Houston. I will say this unequivocally and very, very clearly. Houston boys can ball. And this guy is one of the best guys in Houston. And when I tell you these guys can ball, these cats can ball. And the fact that we are getting a guy of this caliber coming from a league and just a city that prides itself on having some excellent, excellent basketball players, physical, hard-nosed basketball players, and he's shining above most of them, is terrific. I also want to know, me, I'm a Jersey guy, Jason. I'm wondering if he continues the Henderson tradition. Is it number 15 or is it number 12? What's he going to wear next year? Is he going to follow in David's footsteps or in Gerald's footsteps? We will not. We will never know, or at least we won't know for a while. But it will be very interesting to see where he. Because I think both of them might be available next year.
You mentioned Houston. I mentioned Justice Winslow. Of course, folks will remember Justice Winslow, also from Houston.
Mhm.
So, not a bad connection there.
Exactly. And again, we need that hard-nosed type of basketball, the physical basketball that they played on there, but also the gracefulness of how they play on offense. He's going to bring a lot of that to the table in a Duke uniform. We can't wait for that next year, but of course, we have games starting tomorrow for this year's team, of which we are incredibly excited about. So let's leave it here. We'll take a quick break. On the other side, we will hit the gridiron and talk about what happened down in Miami after this.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it. Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
We are back, and Jason, we turn our attention to football, and of course, over the weekend, the Wine Bowl occurred down in Miami between Duke and Miami. Look, this game, the final score was 53-31, but I do want to start by saying this. I commend Duke for how well they played in the first half, being gritty, getting out to they started down, but they fought their way back and was up 21-17 at the half. The second half was just a comedy of errors, it felt like, and it felt like everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong almost all at once. And because of that, Miami was able to take advantage and blow the doors off of Duke to make the score look a little bit more lopsided than I thought it was up to that point. But I did want to start with that. And when you look at some of the, again, you look at some of the stats here, I think there's one stat that kind of stood out to me. Malik Murphy, and I'm not pointing it out because he, was the reason we lost this game. But I will say that Malik Murphy went 25 for 41, 325 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and a lost fumble. Cam Ward, of course, we mentioned Cam Ward is one of the favorites, if not maybe the favorite, for the Heisman Trophy right now. He also went 25 for 41. He threw for 400 yards. He had 5 touchdowns, one pick, and a lost fumble. The difference is right there in the numbers. We had 2 interceptions more than they did, and they turned those into 14 points. That was where it really became lopsided and really with a couple of mistakes. And again, not just on Malik Murphy. There was also some fumbles there, a lot of missed balls. But because of that, it led to us really losing this game, especially it felt like when we went behind in the second half, we tried to make it all up in one play, which is what we said not to do. And that's when Miami took advantage.
Yeah, we talked about in the preview the fact that Miami would get down to teams, down 10, down 20, and just come steamrolling back. I want to just recount for you the way this game went. Over the first 10 minutes, Miami outscores us 14-0. Over the next 20, 25 minutes, we outscored Miami 28-3. Man, those were some glorious 25 minutes, weren't they?
Yeah, it felt great. And here's the funny thing, Jason. You know how we don't like, people like jinxing us and stuff like that. You know how many people were texting me like, yo, you see what your Duke boys are doing? And I'm like, shh, just let it happen. They kept texting me, and sure enough, it jinxed everybody.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, over the final 20, 25 minutes of the game, they outscored us 36-3. By the way, Duke was a 21.5 point underdog in this game. I mean, there was a point midway through the third quarter that you were like, if you were betting on Duke, you're like, let me just collect now. This is a sure thing. And then it went south, and it went south very, very quickly.
Bad beat.
I want to just talk about a couple things during this game. When it was 14-0, it looked like we were about to get blown out. And we punted the ball to Miami. And our defense pulled off a 3-and-out against Miami. And Donald, you pointed this out on the podcast, on the preview episode. 3-and-outs just don't happen for Miami. Like, it's unheard of on the season. And our defense did it. And the offense in that moment suddenly came to life. 4 plays, scored a touchdown. And you were like, ooh, what's going on? And then literally another 3-and-out. Our D was legit great at times in that first half. And yet by the end of the game, somehow Miami's put up 526 yards of offense.
Right. Right.
As great as we were, because we have a great defense. I truly believe that this Duke defensive team is top 15 in the country. And Miami put up 526 yards. Wow. A couple other things I wanted to mention. The 4th down touchdown play. We had a 4th down. We went for it on 4th down, deep in their territory. And it was the catch that the play to Jordan Moore, where we made everything look like it was going one way, and then Jordan Moore went the other way. That was as well designed and well executed a play as I have seen the Duke Blue Devils offense all year, and maybe beyond that. It was just, I was like, that is such beautiful football. And honestly, we haven't seen that kind of thing from Duke very much this year. Gives me a lot of hope for what this team could accomplish moving forward. Speaking of Jordan Moore, the full extension catch by him that was on a 3rd down. Like, literally, we had just fallen behind. Miami just gone ahead. And your thought would have been, this was after they came back from being down 10. That would have been like, oh, this was a 3rd down play. It was huge, huge play. And Jordan Moore just made a ridiculous OBJ kind of catch that you just don't see very often. And then I wanted to shout out a couple guys who I thought had really nice games on offense, because I thought the Duke offense was better than I expected them to be. The obvious one is Peyton Jones, 71 yards on the ground, 61 yards in the air. That's 132 yards from scrimmage for Peyton Jones and 2 touchdowns. I'll admit it. I'd been a little bit of a Peyton Jones doubter this season, and he's convinced me now. That's for sure. Samir Hagans, 9 catches, 139 yards. One of the interesting things I think about Duke, and I don't know if it's necessarily good or bad. The thing I was going to note is that from game to game, you really have no idea who's going to be the big receiver. Sometimes Samir Hagans, sometimes Jordan Moore, sometimes Eli Pankel. Yeah.
Nicky Dalmelin. Yeah.
Yeah. We had Quintavious Brown had one earlier this year. We had
Quayshawn Brown.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I apologize. Jason and names. I get names wrong all the time. In any event, my point is, you don't know which guy is going to be the guy to get, 9 catches in the game. And I think that's a good thing. You can also make a little bit of an argument that, maybe better if there was one Duke receiver that was unguardable. But I mean, it is what it is. And then the last one, you got to shout out Jordan Moore. 5 catches, 75 yards. And as I said, that stunning, the TD catch, as well as the stunning 3rd down catch that gave us hope, at least for a little while.
Yeah. And again, going back to Murphy, I think two of those interceptions were after we went behind, and it felt like the play
Yeah,
call was to go
I don't
for it
blame
all.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. When I compared his numbers, I really want to stress that I was not blaming him for anything or saying that he was the reason we lost that game. But again, it's just that's what happens when teams like Duke go down, right? You want to try and get it back in one play. And against a good team in Miami, who's number 5 in the country, they're not going to let that happen. They're going to get the big play, and the big plays are the momentum breakers for Duke. And so as we move forward, they have NC State this coming weekend. It's 3:30 kickoff, and then they have a bye. So the hope, and it's at Carter Finley. So the hope is that they are able to push these last 2 weeks out of their mind, right? The really gut-wrenching loss against SMU and then this loss against Miami, and then move forward and say, okay, let's turn a new leaf. Let's put everything we can into NC State, because after that we have a break and then we can regroup for the last 2 games of the season and then bowl season. So I'm really hoping that they're able to turn around again, get some of these skill guys back like Star Thomas, get him back going again, and hopefully they're able to put a complete game together against NC State. Jason, anything further from the gridiron?
I feel like the big thing about Duke right now is that this is a better team than I expected them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the past 2 weeks, despite the fact that they have 2 losses, they have shown themselves. SMU and Miami are decently likely to be the 2 teams from the ACC who end up making the college football playoff. There's certainly Miami, but there's a pretty good chance SMU is there as well. Pretty decent chance those are the 2 teams that are playing in the ACC championship game. Duke was right in it with both of them. I mean, frankly, we should have beaten SMU. There's no question about that. Earlier this year, when Duke was picking up wins, we beat UConn, we beat Northwestern. I wasn't that impressed. I'm more impressed with what Duke has done the past 2 weeks in losses than I was with many of the wins earlier this year. This is a team right now that has 6 victories. I'm telling you right out, they're going to end with at least 8 victories. This team is they're going to finish strong. There are teams left on the schedule that Duke is absolutely able to beat. And I am deeply impressed with the progress that this team has made over the course of the season, over the course of the last month or so. That it is clear that the coaches are doing a heck of a job making these guys better and better each and every week. We got our butts kicked late in the game against Miami, but we showed we belong on a field with Miami. And the announcers at one point in this game said, this is Miami's toughest test of the ACC season, of the rest of the ACC season. They're absolutely right. Duke is not a slouch. Duke is a team that can play with just about anybody in the country. And I didn't think that was going to be the case on this team. So I'm incredibly pleased with what they've been. I'm dying to see what they do next.
And as we mentioned, 6-3 feels like where we should be, right? And again, we look at some of these games where we could have won, like SMU, and we go, wow, this team could be really 7-2. But again, the one thing that I didn't like about this game was the final score. I mean, yes, of course, it's 53-31. It's the one thing that, like, when neutral people see the score, they go, oh man, Duke got dusted, when that was not the case, because obviously they didn't see that game. It was a comedy of errors in the second half that led to it getting out of control. But the one thing that Duke has been doing in recent years has been figuring out a way to not let the season unravel. And, that was something that happened, in the late 2010s, where we'd get to 6 wins and then we'd crash out the rest of the season and end up 6-6 and go to a bowl game. This, I hope, again, we turn around and say they're 6-3. We're at NC State, which is basically, we're not traveling far. We get a break. Then we finish out with a home game against Virginia Tech and then on the road at Wake Forest. 3 winnable games, as you mentioned, Jason. 3 games that we might be even favored in. And 3 games that these teams are going to take us seriously. And we need to approach the rest of the season. Let's get 3 wins. 2 would be great as well. And then set us up for a strong bowl game against a strong opponent where we can really show America, hey, the game that you saw, the final score you saw against Miami is not who we are. We are more like the teams that were beating up people early in the season. Our defense is great. Our offense has gotten better, and we want to show that we can put a complete game on the table. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully we get that this weekend against NC State. We obviously talk a little bit more about that game later in the week. But Jason, anything else before we wrap up? Do we want to remind people about the contest that we have?
Yeah, I was just going to say, of course, there's something else we got to do. We have to remind everybody, get your headlines in so you can win that home field pullover. Just fly looking thing. dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Send them to us and we will read them on the air. And then Donald and I will pick the best one to award the prize.
We will show you pictures if you have not seen them. They will be on our social media at Duke Roundup. They will be in the show notes. There'll be a link to that in the show notes. There'll be a link to the Duke pullover. But also, again, you can use our code DBR Podcast to save 15% off of anything on Home Field Apparel, which is a great site. A lot of great stuff. And if you don't have all the Duke stuff like I do, you can use this code and start your way towards owning everything that Duke has made, or that Home Field Apparel has made for Duke. So, but again, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. That's where you send your headlines for this game. The Maine Black Bears are coming to town. It's the first game of the season, ladies and gentlemen. Jason and I are ready. Are you ready? I think we are all ready. Let's go home. This has been episode 659 of the DBR Podcast. For Jason, I am Donald, and now it is time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.